Hello and welcome to The Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to The Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Matt Horton, CEO of Voltera. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to do this.
I'm excited to have you here because large-scale infrastructure charging is the future. We're not going to be able to introduce large-scale EVs unless we have the charging. And Bloomberg Intelligence is predicting that there needs to be $42 billion, I repeat, $42 billion in EV charging infrastructure investments by the end of the decade to keep up projected EV adoption in the United States. Assuming this projection is correct, how are we going to achieve that? We're going into a recession. We have interest rates at 8.2%. Not a good financial outlook.
Thanks for that introduction. I totally support the forecast there. I think, in fact, we may need to deploy even more capital and do it more quickly to really meet the demand that we're seeing from customers. And now that the OEMs are starting to roll vehicles out, I think this market is going to move much faster than a lot of people predict. This is one of the most exciting times in the transportation business that I think we've had in 100 years. Myself, I've been around mobility and transportation most of my career, and I've never seen a moment like this. You mentioned some of the headwinds with recession and higher interest rate environments. EV charging today is still one of the categories that is attracting a lot of capital. And we think we've got a multi-decade challenge ahead of us that is going to be, again, one of the most exciting industrial transformations that we'll see in our lifetimes. I love being in the charging business because we get to connect these two massive trends, the electrification of all of our vehicles and the cleaning of the grid, and helping find ways to bring cleaner power to electric vehicles where it's needed. It's a huge challenge, and it's one that at Voltera we're excited to take on. The other thing you mentioned just quickly is how are we going to do this? It's going to take a huge number of people to do it. We're fortunate that we're not alone in this business. There are plenty of other companies that have identified heavy-duty fleet EV charging as a big opportunity. Lots of capital is coming to the table, as I mentioned. And again, such a big opportunity that we need lots of help in doing this.
It's a big opportunity. It's also a real estate opportunity. If the company becomes successful, you can spin it out and float it as a REIT. There's a market for that.
It certainly is. It's becoming more and more clear that real estate is a key to success in the charging business. You've got to make sure that we have charging in the right locations, the places that both consumers and fleets want to charge. The big challenge that creates, though, is in most cases, that's not the same place where you've got the power necessary to charge. So again, a big part of the challenge ahead of us is fundamentally rewiring the grid to deliver power where it's going to be needed for transportation uses, not just for commercial, residential, and industrial, as we've seen it in the last 100 years or so. And that's a big part of the challenge that Voltera is taking on, is working with utilities, acquiring real estate, the real estate that we think is going to be best for charging, and then starting the hard work that takes years in many cases to get 10 megawatts or more to some of these sites. It's a heavy lift, but it's something that we don't shy away from doing.
Is the heavy lift in permitting and going through the permitting process to get the energy there? Is that one of the big heavy lifts you have to go through?
That is a big part of it. And one of the challenges of developing in North America is every municipality, every jurisdiction is different. We have so many different permitting rules everywhere that we go that there is a big part of the process that is caught up in just getting approvals. That's not the only one, though. Certainly, working with the utilities, again, these are long duration projects to have them make improvements to substations, to redo distribution lines in some cases, to invest in the transformers and other equipment that's necessary. And then you combine that with a global supply chain challenge around some of these hardware products as well. It has been very difficult, and that shows up in long times to get power. So we recognize that there are very few solutions, no silver bullets that are going to fix this overnight in terms of the way that utilities work. So our focus is getting started early. So we're trying to get ahead of customer demand, starting to do this power development several years in some cases before the customers are going to be ready. So the challenge for us is understanding where they're going to need to be before they know it necessarily.
While you deal with the utilities and the long times to potentially get power, it also creates the opportunity for planning. I'll give you an example. Brightline Trains operates in South Florida, currently going from West Palm Beach to Miami and eventually going to Orlando and then Tampa. And they have a rideshare program that runs a fleet of Tesla Model Ys. The interesting thing there is that the vehicles have to go 3-4 miles away to charge. There's no infrastructure near the station to charge. Is that something if a company such as Brightline approached Voltera and says, hey, we want to introduce this, can you build a charging facility there? Is that an example of how you can use that time to become productive?
Yeah, that's a great example and a use case that that would fit really well with our business model. As I mentioned, we're trying to get ahead of customers and develop before they tell us where they need to be. But today, there are so many use cases like the one you mentioned where customer has a need today that they're approaching us asking if we can develop either a specific piece of property for them or that we can find one in the right geography. So yeah, that's a great example. Unfortunately for their needs, they already need it today. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So we're meeting customers where they are and getting going on building out the infrastructure they need.
We're still in the early days of EV adoption, both from a commercial standpoint and from a consumer standpoint. You have experience on the consumer side at Rivian. You have experience on the commercial side, Proterra. How do you see the EV adoption playing out over the next decade? Do you see an acceleration or where do you see this going?
So I've always been an optimist in terms of the growth rate and the acceleration of deployments. But the world, it feels like, is finally catching up with me. We are seeing just such a great improvement in the number of vehicles available and importantly in the capability of the OEMs to build and deploy. The market will develop segment by segment. It's not all going to be uniform. When I was at Proterra in the transit bus space, we were pretty proud to say that we thought transit was going to be the first market to go 100% electric. And while a lot of people didn't pay as much attention to that market, it's one that has adopted vehicles much faster than the light duty passenger car segment has. So some segments of commercial will go very, very fast. I'm very encouraged that passenger cars finally seems to be really catching up quickly. But across the board, we're going to see segment after segment start to move into full adoption mode. It still will take a decade or more in many of these markets to fully transition to 100% new sales of electric. But it's no longer crazy to be talking about that time frame being within the next decade for many vehicle types.
We want to compare and contrast history. It reminds me of when large corporations started outsourcing to the cloud. Oh, wow, the cloud's not safe. You have to do a hybrid approach. You have to build it there. But we had a big breakthrough in 2009. Facebook planned their first data center in Oregon. That was when Voltera was spun out of EdgeConnect. So the timing is there, 2009. Today in 2022, we're in similar times. Do you see this being the revolution from in-house data to the cloud being very similar to what you're building Voltera, so Voltera becomes the cloud for EV charging?
That is a really insightful comment. And yes, it was a big part of our thinking. For those of us who've been in and around this business for a long time, I love charging. I love the infrastructure. And I think we have to recognize that we have not historically done a great job of delivering high reliability and really bringing a product to market that will meet the broad customer need that's out there. So we have been spending a lot of time looking at other industries, other markets that have achieved scale and have achieved reliability. The data center industry is a really good example, like you pointed to. The company EdgeConnects that we spun our team out of and have partnered with, they've got a lot of experience building data centers for those big companies like Facebook and others that you mentioned. And that business has seen a transition over the years from big customers wanting to build it themselves to realizing it's so much better and faster and easier for them to partner with developers like EdgeConneX to make that happen. So that is a big part of the thinking behind what we're doing here. In a similar way, a lot of big fleet customers today think they want to own and build and deploy the infrastructure themselves. I've found so many times in my career a customer that they'll do that for about 18 months and then realize it's really hard, it's really complicated, it's not core to their business, it's expensive to do. And we're seeing many of those customers now looking to transition to a sort of hosted third-party charging facility. Just like you said, much like migrating data to the cloud, we think a lot of charging over time is going to be done off premises at third-party sites like ours. So a great metaphor. And there really are a lot of important lessons that the charging industry can learn from the digital infrastructure space, from wireless telecom, from data centers. And we want to deploy a lot of that learning and a lot of the approach to really build charging right so that it will be reliable and cost effective, and can be where customers need it in the time frame they need it.
I'll give you another metaphor. The cloud allowed Instagram to scale and sell to Facebook for $1 billion. It had the infrastructure that allowed them to scale. You're going to give for an EV fleet owner or an autonomous vehicle fleet owner for that ability, the ability to scale. It's very similar to the cloud. You're allowing that company to scale and to focus on what they know best.
That's exactly right. Our business, we're intending to build out the physical layer of charging infrastructure, getting the power, getting other energy assets, including storage and solar and other things that are going to be necessary, focusing on building that layer that will support a number of different kinds of businesses that have a vital stake in charging vehicles. Some of those will be dedicated fleets that want their own facilities to charge their own vehicles. Some of that will be more flexible for fleets that want to be able to use a variety of different facilities. But we want to help people help make it as easy as possible for companies in this space to electrify and to provide charging services where and when they need them. So great metaphor there.
Easy as possible. Voltera, you're gonna build, own, operate, strategically locate fit for purpose charging facilities. Let's just ask you point blank: is what you're building data center 2.0?
We hope so. When you look at the incredible growth of the data center industry and how they've been able to scale to meet the needs that the digital world has, we're optimistic and hopeful that we'll do the same for this business in terms of, again, attracting enormous amounts of capital, deploying it on behalf of great customers that we have longstanding relationships with. So we hope that this will follow a similar trajectory and effectively create a new real estate asset class focused on these kind of new charging facilities.
You're going down the right path because data center REITs, they pay handsome dividends. They have great fixed income investors that are long and stable. So you're going down the right path. As you eventually, before you get there, you have to scale the business. How are you planning to scale these charging facilities? Do you have a real estate team that's looking to acquire strategic locations? Are you trying to partner with local utilities? How are you planning on scaling these stations?
That is the key challenge. People ask me a lot, what keeps me up at night? What do I worry about? And it is that it's simply scaling fast enough to meet the scope of the opportunity we have here. So how do we do it? Again, we've taken some lessons from the EdgeConneX experience. We've brought a team out of EdgeConneX that we're focused on real estate, site acquisition, power development, and bringing those same skills to bear on these large facilities that we're deploying out there. We need, as I mentioned, we need a lot of other companies doing the same thing. And we hope that others will sort of draft off of the approach that we're taking. But it's a combination of our own team and some partners that we're working with that are helping us build the right models and find the right sites and then executing on those. And then our own internal development team that's hard at work converting these sites into the charging facilities that we're going to need.
What is the model and why does it appeal to a large EV fleet owner? Why would they want to choose Voltera?
There are a bunch of different reasons. One is we like to say that as a company, we lean into the toughest challenges that our customers have. Building infrastructure at scale is a really, really challenging task. In the early days of electrification, for a fleet to put in 5 or 10 chargers was not that big a deal. But when you're looking at fully electrifying a vehicle fleet of hundreds of vehicles, there's an enormous, very heavy lift in getting 10 megawatts or more of power to a site. So it's time consuming. It's technically very challenging, and you've got to have expertise on the team to do it. It's very expensive as well, and the amount of capital that you have to put out up front to deploy the infrastructure is prohibitive for a lot of customers. So a group like ours that can handle a beginning to end, the entire process of site selection, permitting, all the construction management, deployment, commissioning of the chargers, and then operations and maintenance, we just take all of that challenge and worry off the customer's plate. And then what's even better for them is they don't have to pay for it up front. They pay for it over time as they use it. So financially and just from a complexity and a challenge standpoint, I think it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. I'll give you another business that reminds me of this, a Bloomberg terminal. Once you get a terminal, you get hooked on it and you keep paying your monthly fee. It's very similar because you're allowing traders and investors to do their job with the Bloomberg terminal. And on the other side, you're allowing businesses, fleet owners, if it's independent Amazon fleet delivery businesses or if it's large-scale Class A truck owners, to do their business. I see a lot of similarities here with businesses that are very profitable currently in the market. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, so we look at deploying hundreds of millions and into the billions of dollars of capital into this market opportunity. We really have to carefully analyze risk. We get that question a lot about the risk of deploying this infrastructure for these customers. One of the great things about what we do is that this infrastructure is so core to the operations of these businesses that our risk is greatly reduced because these customers do, like the Bloomberg terminal you mentioned, they build their operations around the timing of charging and the need to charge and where they're going to charge. So we think this is a very sticky application. We are very confident that once we deploy the infrastructure, the customers are going to want to stay there for the long term. And today we're not having any problem getting customers to sign up to very long-term contracts because they're just like we are. They're making a long-term commitment to electrifying the business.
If you're making a long-term commitment to electrify the business, you're not going to get up and quit 12 months from here, 18 months, 36 months. You're really committed to it. Now we have the Tesla Semi deliveries. They're coming online in the coming weeks. Are you seeing a large demand from shippers and carriers who want to reduce their carbon emissions to say, hey, Voltera, we've got these Tesla semis coming. Oh, boy, we need charging and we need lots of charging.
Yeah. As we look at the different market segments, we have, as an industry, always assumed that Class 8 heavy trucking was going to be one of the last markets to electrify, given the logistical challenges of it. But I've been surprised at how fast that market has started to gain momentum in the last couple of years. So we are seeing a lot of demand from shippers and other folks in the logistics supply chain. What we are seeing, though, is most of them, they're waiting for the battery technology and the charging infrastructure to mature a bit before they're really going to be ready to fully deploy Class 8 long-haul trucks. So what we are seeing is a lot of focus on ports and what's sort of called the mid-mile, getting from a port to a distribution facility. Those opportunities are ripe today, and we are seeing customers move quickly there. So we're focusing a lot of our development effort around support for those kind of regional charge needs. And then over time, the customers are looking to connect those on longer distance corridors between major markets. So we're trying to get ahead of where our customers want to be. They clearly do want to be able to fully electrify these long routes, and we're going to go stepwise into that with them. It's also very exciting to see what's been happening with megawatt scale charging in the last couple of years, going from an idea that we all sort of knew we would need to get to the first demonstrations of hardware I think the next 4 or 5 years are going to be a very exciting time at that very high power end of the spectrum. And once we unlock truly megawatt scale charging, I think the opportunity for long haul Class 8 is going to blow wide open.
It's going to get there. Today we have range limitations. I'll give you an example of a very heavy traffic trucking route. Port of Long Beach, San Pedro, LA to Fontana, where all the distribution centers are. Well, you, in theory, this is in theory, build a EV charging complex in Fontana and then build another EV charging complex somewhere near the port to ensure that those Class A's can have energy on both sides?
Yeah, we haven't publicly announced the customer yet, but we are developing our first site in the Long Beach area that's eventually going to be a 12 megawatt charging site. So yes, exactly as you described, we want to make sure we've got the right charging for those customers, on those heavy logistics and transportation routes like the one you mentioned.
How are you going to source 12 megawatts of power? That's the big question I have for you there.
Yeah, it takes a lot of creativity. And we think that this is one of the areas where our team really shines is, one, in being able to work closely with the utilities to accelerate the timelines wherever we can. And then also finding creative solutions to getting power on site early. And that is a combination of, sometimes on-site generation, energy storage deployments that can help us get all we can out of the infrastructure that's there while we're building toward permanent, appropriately sized infrastructure from the utility.
All right, I got to go back to the data centers, and we're going to go to One Wilshire in downtown LA. They're pulling in fiber from Nevada. They're pulling it in from Northern California, Southern California, multiple fiber pipes going in there to ensure that those data centers are always operating. Will you pull the energy from different energy sources, perhaps in going down more to the San Diego region, out into the Barstow, Fontana region, and then up into the, let's say, the Calabasas, Los Angeles region to ensure that you have enough energy and you're not straining one particular part of a county's grid?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. As we think about it, job one is creating a large enough connection to the grid just to ensure that we can get power to the site. We also really focus a lot of effort on optimizing the energy at the site. So squeezing every last drop that we can out of the infrastructure that's there today and that will be in the future so that we're not overbuilding. And that we're keeping a close eye on the opportunities in V2G, certainly stationary storage and on-site distributed energy resources like solar. So we want to optimize the sites and we want to make sure they've got a robust connection to the grid. Once we've got that in place, then we can work with our customer to figure out the power procurement strategy for the longer term. And part of that is, as you said, knowing where we can draw power from. But a really important piece of it is also what the source of that power is. So providing more renewable content over time. That's something that many of us at Voltera are really passionate about, is connecting electric vehicles with renewables. And fortunately for markets like California, like you mentioned, there is an increasing amount of renewable energy content coming onto the grid. But we also do want to help our customers contract directly with renewable energy providers so that they can be sure that they're getting 100% renewable power and that it's more local and in places where it's going to have a real impact on the grid. We think there's still work to be done there, but we have heard from a lot of customers that they'd love to have a partner that can just take all the concerns about Scope 3 emissions off the plate completely, that they know that if they're charging with you, they're getting 100% clean, high quality renewables. So we think that's going to be a big part of our future as well as we work to optimize the energy flows of the sites.
It's going to be a big part of your customers' future. There will be large companies in the future that will not ship with somebody unless it's using 100% renewable energy. They'll be able to charge a higher rate for that, but it also becomes a catalyst for them to drive business. Well, that becomes a catalyst. I think about certain parts of the United States that are heavy trafficked areas, and we see what happens in Texas a lot with their energy grid. Is there even enough power in the grid today in the certain, let's say, large industrial regions to support Class 8 trucks going fully electrified, or do we have to build micro grids, put in battery storage, or put, if you want to use, I'll use another data term for you, put in a firewall to ensure that there's always charging available?
So there's no one size fits all answer. Every utility is a little different in their capabilities. Every region is quite varied. So, we take when we enter a new region, we do look at and consider, certainly in conversation with the utilities, what that environment looks like, so that we're planning appropriately. In most places in the country, there isn't a challenge of power production. It's more a challenge of power distribution and timing. You mentioned a lot of the tools, microgrids, smart charging, on-site generation. Those are all things that can help. But at its core, it's largely a question of routing the power from the utility to where it needs to be, and making sure that we're working with fleets that have uses that are compatible with the needs of the grid in a particular location. With most fleet customers, there's generally some flexibility in the timing of when they can charge their vehicles, and that certainly helps us bring all the puzzle pieces together to get the right solution for a given utility in a given location with a given customer's needs. So generally, we have found that utilities can get power where it's needed. It just takes some time, again, to sort of rewire that distribution edge of the grid.
Well, it takes time. Planning takes time. You're starting to see a lot of large corporations are moving their fleets to electrification. Then we have Domino's made an announcement they're buying 800 Chevy Bolt electric vehicles to be used across the United States, which has me thinking Chipotle does delivery, McDonald's in some markets does delivery, Wendy's does some delivery, and they're commonly referred to as QSRs, which are quick service restaurants. And they're going into delivery. Do you get to a point where Voltera partners with the QSR industry and sets up strategic charging infrastructure located in certain high-density towns where the Domino's vehicle will come in, the Chipotle vehicle will come in, the McDonald's vehicle will come in and charge to ensure they can deliver their products to their customers in a very clean, energy-efficient way?
Again, we see an evolution in our business and in the way that fleets will be charged. When you look at a lot of what's happening today, it's big fleet customers that want to electrify centralized depots. What's happening is that is moving to smaller fleets of distributed vehicles that are not necessarily controlled by one company. So thinking about, in the case of Amazon or other delivery companies, they often have a sort of an independent service provider model where they're small owners of smaller fleets that don't have a big facility and aren't going to be able to invest in the infrastructure themselves. You mentioned a lot of the delivery for food and other kind of local needs. Again, those are also tend to be small operators. A lot of work in the rideshare space as well is with these individual owner operators of vehicles. Those folks all need places where they can go and centrally charge. So yes, exactly what you said is correct. It's what we see happening more and more frequently in the future. We are the facilities that we develop, we want to make them sites where we can have many different customers contracted for power at those sites, so that we can support a host of customer needs. One of the reasons why that's really important is for utilization. If we can get fleets that have compatible uses, say a fleet that's going to charge all night, coupled with fleets that are going to use high power charging during the day for fast charging, that's a great partnership, and allows us to use that same infrastructure over a larger period of the day, drives down the cost for everybody. So that's a big part of what we spend our time thinking about, is how do we build sites that are going to serve multiple uses and drive the highest utilization.
I'll give you two examples. Two of the world's most busiest airports located in the United States, Atlanta Hartfield's Jackson in Atlanta, and LAX in Los Angeles. Lyft has publicly stated they want to go to an all-EV fleet. Dara Kawasaki at Uber has been very public about moving Uber to more sustainability. Do we get to a point in the future where Uber and Lyft become your customers, where they guarantee you a certain amount of financial payment, where the rideshare drivers can go charge at those international airports? They can ensure when they pick the customer up, there's no range anxiety. They can get into a clean electric vehicle and go on to their destination, while from a business standpoint, you're having Uber's balance sheet and Lyft's balance sheet back up the payment, and you're not relying on an individual?
We think that is a direction that the industry should and likely will move toward. to achieve the goals that Lyft and Uber and others have and the regulations, it's going to be very difficult to convert those fleets to electric without dedicated infrastructure that their drivers know they can have access to. So we do see a strong driver in that direction. We also see a similar need for a lot of the rental companies as well, where today they have a certain way of refueling their vehicles, but in the near future, as those go increasingly electric, making sure that they've got enough capacity of their own to charge up vehicles when they come back, not fully charged, and for their drivers when they're out on the road. We think these rental companies, ride-hail companies, and others have a very powerful role to play in directing their drivers to the infrastructure that's going to be the most cost-effective and most convenient. So yeah, that's as we think about places that we're developing, that's definitely on our target list for development opportunities where we have high density of that kind of need for third-party charging.
Voltera, you're going to play a key role in the future of EV fleets. There is no solution. What you're describing is the right solution. When a Hertz or an Avis or a rental car center, or let's even say an airport authority calls you up, are they very enthusiastic calls and saying, okay, Matt, we need this. We're getting demand from our drivers and our passengers that they want electric vehicles, but we need charging?
Depends on the customer, certainly, but we probably get equal calls with a voice that's terrified on the other end because they don't know how to do this and they've got high pressure on them to get something done. And others who feel like they've done all their homework and they know that this is the right answer, that they do not want to do this themselves. So again, we want to meet the customers where they are, but that is what people reach out to us for. Is we want to be the I think they view us as the easiest solution to deploying infrastructure. It's also one thing that's really exciting about this, the time in the market that we're in. Again, the capital markets have identified this as one of the really big growth opportunities and a new asset class that's emerging. And we've been very fortunate to partner with a very large global private equity infrastructure fund that's given us a multi-billion-dollar commitment in equity to build this out. But it's the infrastructure to date has been built on the back of very, very expensive venture capital and public equity dollars. We're coming to this business with a sort of an infrastructure style capital that's very patient, used to long development timelines, typically doesn't have the same kind of hurdle requirements that expensive venture capital dollars do. So we think we're the right partner for companies that want to be in the space, that want to build electric vehicle and charging businesses. Again, because we can take a very long-term view of 20 or 30 years on a property, and that really lowers the cost to a customer of using our infrastructure.
When you're taking that long-term view, the autonomous vehicle industry is taking that long-term view. The technology is just starting to become commercialized. They're operating in several cities. Waymo's operating in Phoenix, Chandler, San Francisco. Cruise is operating in Phoenix and San Francisco right now, and they're taking out time and they're building it up, and they have multi-year roadmaps. In some cases, they have multi-decade roadmaps of where they want to go. Have you had discussion with the autonomous vehicle companies that they don't want to own, they don't want to operate the own EV charging, saying, hi, we're Voltera, we have a solution. You build the world's best driver, we build the world's best infrastructure.
I'm going to use that pitch, if you don't mind. Without going into any specific detail about particular customer conversations, I can say in general that the model that we've developed is a perfect fit for those type of autonomous fleets. We have not only the capability to deliver great charging assets in the locations where it's necessary, but we can also meet a variety of other needs that those fleets have. Some things that are surprising to some, things you don't realize until you're really in that business. But things like office space and lounges for staff, their maintenance needs and cleaning and other things that go with running an autonomous fleet. that those are all things that we can invest in for our customers at these sites. So we want to be a one-stop shop. We want to be the facility that can meet all of their needs, and we are very optimistic about our business model and the fit with fleets in the autonomous space.
I recently visited an autonomous trucking company and went through their facility, and they were explaining to me how they had to cut a deal with Amazon to get a direct pipe to AWS to be able to upload all the data that comes off the trucks every day. Data center model again, is that something for the AV companies that you can build, that you can negotiate with Amazon, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure to ensure they have that fat pipe? And so when the AV company goes into your facility, okay, we've got our on-site data, we've got our pipe connection, we have our facilities. Is that you can do the whole thing for them?
Yep. So that's, again, one of the strengths of our relationship with EdgeConneX in the autonomous vehicle space in particular, where there are such massive data needs. Through our relationship, we're able to develop mini data centers on site for customers that need those. So having a partner who's one of the best in the world at doing that has, I think, really made us a great partner for companies in the space that have both needs for energy and data at a facility. We think we're very well positioned to serve those customers.
From what you described during this podcast, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you are very well prepared. You're laying the pieces together. The data center backbone of how the company was formed is going to be one of your competitive advantages, along with the EQT patient equity, which will allow you to build a business. Looking to the future, what market do you see being Voltera's largest growth market? Is it going to be autonomous vehicles? Is it going to be the commercial Class 8 going to electrification? Well, perhaps it's the Amazons of the world for the last mile deliveries that's all getting electrified. Where do you see your largest growth market being?
Yeah, we are, again, we're very optimistic about the future of the autonomous vehicle space. We have to recognize there are still a lot of hurdles in place from a regulatory and a societal standpoint. But to the extent that autonomous vehicles do ultimately meet the promise that they have, we think that could be one of the largest segments, given that so much of our passenger car traffic could go in that direction. We think that is one of the biggest opportunities out there. The other one is the delivery and distribution space. We think is a huge opportunity. You mentioned last mile and some of the mid-mile and other. That, again, is a market that over time we do believe is going to increasingly transition to third-party sites. We think that will be a gigantic market for us as well. And we are actively making investments today to meet those needs of the future in that market. So I would point you to probably those two as some of the biggest growth opportunities we see ahead of us, and markets where we think as a company we're particularly well suited to play. And that comes back to, as you said, having the right kind and amount of capital to deploy at scale, having the experience and expertise from the data center business through our EdgeConneX partnership and our team that we pulled out of EdgeConneX, and then combining that with a great team of people that we've been building that have deep experience in fleet and consumer charging at a number of leading companies in the space. We do like to think we're bringing capital, the capability together, and it's going to allow us to deploy a lot of capacity in terms of megawatts deployed in the field.
Capacity was needed to scale EVs, and on the autonomous vehicle thing, you mentioned to meet the promise they have. Autonomous vehicles will meet the promise they have. There's a lot of negative headlines today, but the technology is real. It's scaling. It's going to have a dramatic positive impact on society, the same exact way electric vehicles have a positive impact on society. And in order to get there, we have to have EV charging, and that's what Voltera is building. Matt, in your opinion, what is the future of EV charging facilities? Do they get bigger? Do they get more bespoke? Where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, I think EV charging is going to become ubiquitous in our world. I believe we will see a day when nearly every residence, nearly every multifamily dwelling, offices, public spaces are all going to have charging available. I think for a lot of us in the future, it'll be less about charging and more about being connected to the grid. with V2G and other technologies, I think we're going to want to have a connection with the grid anytime the car is sitting still. So I think we're going to see a proliferation across all segments of charging. But in the fleet space in particular, we are very confident that the model is going to increasingly shift toward dedicated third-party managed facilities. That is going to relieve a lot of the stress that big fleets have today about only having 4 years left on their lease at a particular building. And what if they lose the lease? They can't invest in that equipment and the charging hardware. So we think that moves to, yes, much larger centralized facilities that'll be used by a host of different fleets. It's not that we're going to recreate the current fueling infrastructure in the same way, but there is going to be, I believe, a huge business for both fleet and public charging based on building these larger dedicated charging facilities.
Matt, what you described during this podcast is the future. You're allowing EV fleet owners to operate a business while you focus on the infrastructure. What you're enabling is companies and entrepreneurs to build the future. Matt, you are the AWS of the future, sir. And as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
I would tell people that, as you pointed out with autonomous vehicles and some of the negative headlines, these markets go through the hype cycle. I think we had overbuilt expectations, and I'll say both for AV and EV early on. We're a bit in the trough of disillusionment in a way in some of these, in the market's progress. But exactly as you said, these are real technologies. The fundamental economic drivers are going to make this a reality. It's almost an unstoppable force at this point. And the changes that are going to be made in the next decade are going to be stunning. We are going to exit the end of this decade with a vehicle fleet in North America that is going to be rapidly moving toward fully electric. Combustion engine vehicles are going to start to feel like dinosaurs before long. And we have demonstrated in the United States before that we can build big things. We can do things at scale. The amount of charging infrastructure that will be deployed will be staggering. And we've got 175,000 gas stations or so out there. We're going to blow past that number of high quality charging locations very, very quickly. So it's an exciting time. And I would tell all the listeners that there are so many reasons for optimism about the future of this business. Despite some of the headwinds we mentioned at the outset, this is one of the biggest growth areas that we're going to see in the next couple of decades. So it's a great time to be in the business.
It's a great time to be in the business. It's a great time to always be positive. EVs are an unstoppable force that are going to require significant EV charging infrastructure, and that's exactly what Matt and the team of Voltera are building, because the future is bright, the future is autonomous, and the future is Voltera. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.